Hey guys, hi, I'm Sumit. I'm here to talk about on AWS Lambda. You know, these days, if you work in a software industry, AWS Lambda is quite famous these days because of number of use cases that it's solving. The main purpose I'm putting this video is to have a quick knowledge, understand what this technology meant for when you actually need to use this technology because there are several use cases, there are multiple things that you can talk around, but I would like to quickly capture like what is Lambda and what it does. So, like let's say you have a machine and you want to run some code. So what AWS is giving right now to you, they give you a functional unit in which they will give you an infrastructure where you can define what sort of programming block that want to execute. You can also imagine like you have a class, you define your functions, and if you want to run your functions for, let's say you run a functions to add two numbers. It's very simple. So you can run it your local IDE. We call it like an editor, and you can just run this through a Lambda. Do not get confused like you want to put like these code on the Lambda. I'm coming to that point very soon. What I'm going to add here is a very simple thing, which is an AWS Lambda about why this technology is. There are multiple stuff these days which are event based. Let's say something added on the S3 bucket. Most of you are familiar with S3. If good, otherwise S3 is just a storage service that Amazon provides. My entire talk is on Amazon, so I'm going to add multiple videos. So please follow my channel and subscribe. And my idea is do not talk anything which on documentations or internet like these stuff, do theoretical stuff. I will just go straight dive into the program and show you how it works. So let's quickly jump what is Lambda and how does it work, and I'll show you directly on my Amazon account right here. So let me directly take you to the Lambda. So here's my Amazon account. Let's say I talk AWS Lambda. So it should give me the Lambda service. I should type this, yeah, because we are already in AWS. Now, like you see here, I already have one functions which is defined as demo AWS Lambda. So for our exercise here, we are going to create a brand new functions. Let's call what is this function is all about. So you can just click here on the create button of create functions, and you have multiple ways to do that. I have multiple upcoming tutorials which are coming on when you have to use from scratch, when you want to use in a blueprint and a container image. But let's focus on just one part because once you have a basic understanding, you can easily distinguish what's happening around like container and a blueprint and a scratch. For this video, let's go for a scratch. You can define your own functional name. I call it like, okay, I call it like tutorial test and Lambda. Like I said, AWS gives you a way in which you can provision your code to execute on their infrastructure, and they define a multiple languages on which you can support your execution. It could be Java, it could be Node, it could be Python, it could be Ruby, .NET, anything else. Like you see, I can scroll down for you, and you also list down all the versions that we have. For now, let's say I'm going to put that on AWS for Python 3.8, and these are the different architecture versions. I can deep dive here, but not it's a good time to talk on this. I'll definitely add this different architecture, how this is more CPU efficient above for 86 version. But yeah, we come to this point. For this video, let's make it very simple. Now, we have a function name, we have a which word Python we wanted to run, and here we go. Boom, we created functions. So now it will show you, you just created a functions, but what this function will do. So meanwhile, you see here a spinning window on my cursor. This says like AWS creating a functions. Now, hey, here you go. AWS created a function tutorial test for you. And here's the part that you need to know. You have multiple stuff that also came along with this new window, and the most important part is AWS give you a by default code on the Lambda which looks like this. Here is the key point. When you define a Lambda in Python, I can show you in other languages as well in my upcoming videos. For Python, this is a function which is the Lambda handler, which gets called by your execution. How does it get executed? Leave for the time. I'm also coming to that point. Now, for all those Python developers, it's very easy code. You can just take a look like, hey, this is something Lambda handler I have here, which what it does, it returns just hello from the Lambda. So let's call it hello from the Lambda. And this is the code that I wanted to run. So let's try and test it out. So you can create a test event, let's say, and you run this part. You define this. If there are more argument that you want to pass, you can also define this here in the JSON. But for now, just define an event. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to put here is like how you going to run that Lambda through AWS console itself. In a very short while, in a very short moment, I'll show you how you can work it through an API gateway plus running through an editor. So here we go. Let's run this part and you see. Great. You see like hello from the Lambda with the status code is 200 and this is the test event we created. And there are multiple request IDs, other stuff that is through the duration, like how long it ran, what is the memory size is consumed, and what the max it has. You don't need to worry about these things. You'll come over the time. But for now, this is the most important part that we have in the Lambda. You see here is a hello from the Lambda that ran and it came out with a result here. Now let's change the code real quick. Hello from the Lambda and from the India. I'm from India. Let me add India here. So you can just put in deploy. So whatever changes you do there in the code editor, because AWS is giving you a flexibility that you can write the code here, right here in the console. Now, once you deploy, the moment you write something here, let me put one more exclamation sign here, and by this you will see like this particular deploy button gets here we go. You see, change is not deployed. Just click on deploy, it will be deployed. The moment it's deployed, it's very obvious for all the software engineers and developers who work in the software industry that something which is already ready for use. Now you can go and run it again and see, boom, hello from Lambda and from the India. Cool. So guy, we just got like how do you create a Lambda functions and how you can run it through an AWS UI console. Now what next? Now, what next is the first point is what are these values, the layers, the triggers, what we see here, what the destinations is. So in this video, let me cover what is this trigger, and the next video I'll cover the layers and the destinations. So let me quickly tell you. Now, like in any object, you create a functions and then you want to call that functions because think in this way, you are going to deploy your Lambda on AWS and let's say on some other places like from your local machine or from the other server you want to hit that lambda code. Although Lambda has a different way the Lambda can be invoked, but one of the way I'm going to teach you is like add trigger. Just click on that add trigger and you say there are multiple sources a trigger can be done. The trigger, the name as the name sounds, it's very obvious. You just go and call that Lambda function. Again, guys, there's a huge list of way in which Lambda can be called. And like I say, stick to the fundamental, understand the concept, understand the use cases, and then you can integrate any of these without having any hiccup because you'll be fine-tuned with every single minute details. Now let me cover for you for the API gateway. This is one of the way in which you can go and call your Lambda functions. And with this way, you can also you do an authentication. With or without authentication, you can have it. Definitely, we want to go with the authentication. I'll show you both. So now this says like I want to call my Lambda with an API gateway, and we can have an intent as for this, a new API, use an existing API. I want to create a new one. So again, it gives the flexibility saying, hey, do you want an HTTP API or REST API? So let's say I call an HTTP API for this, and here we go. Just create that. Sorry, I just didn't choose on this part. So make it an open because I want to call this easily without any authentication. In a very short while, I'll show you how we can authenticate also. Now here we go. This window, this particular API endpoint. So this API endpoint is an HTTPS endpoint, like you see here, secure endpoint. And once you click on this, you see here, hello from the Lambda and from the India. So like even like after this video, I'm going to delete that because it can be used for distributed denial of attack on my account because this is public URL. But once you create on your own account, just go and use this endpoint. So now here's the beauty. You might have seen like in a multiple request, try to understand the software practices. So Lambda has just given you a way of execute your code, and they also give you an endpoint where you can trigger and actually execute a Lambda code to an API gateway. This is one of the way. Now the further question comes, hey, this is not secure. Anybody can call it. That's why this is definitely not recommended the way it's being called. So let's add a trigger again. I'll show you how you can make it more authenticated version of call. Here we go. Again, call an API, call an REST API, and here you go. Make an API key here. Here you choose an API key. Configure the security mechanism for an API endpoint. So only with an API key, that means you can call this particular Lambda function. Otherwise, you cannot. So like you see here in the console again, like let's say here this part, you see here the first one that I had created. There's no API key configured here. And if you come here on this point, you see here there's an API key. Well, this API key is again I have to delete because this is public. I have added in the YouTube. I cannot keep it for long. I'll delete that so nobody can hit my own account. Here we go. Once you have this API, there are multiple ways you can call this up. So if I, like if I hit this point, what will happen? Yes, yeah, there'll be forbidden exception because you have just called something without any authentication. So that's what we want. We need a security for all the APIs. So here we go. You just keep this URL. I'll show you, and I can really hook that real quick in my, let's say, one of the quick code to call in Python. And I also want to show like my keys. Here are my keys. Here are my keys. Mhm. There we go. Oh, not this one. Sorry. Let me call this one. I pressed the wrong place. Now it's correct one. There we go. Now, now what happened just now? I'll show you in a moment. So here we go. You see, there's a new execution that just happened here, and the Lambda is executed. Now, the main point that I'm trying to add here is, you need to understand like so for what I have just showed to you, I created a Lambda function. Then I gave a way how you can create trigger a Lambda and just make sure, guy, I'm adding it again. Like I showed you, there's no just one single way. There are multiple ways you can call API gateway through a Lambda. API gateway I just showed you once. Now, what is layers? What are destinations? I'll coming to that point. The Lambda is a very cool and easy topic, but you know what? Try this first as a practice. And once you're done with this, I'll tell you about the layers. For now, just understand if you write a Python code, you manage your dependencies. To manage dependencies, you need to use a request. Let's say request library and pandas library and any other libraries. So those libraries, normally a Python developer used to maintain in your requirement or txt file, and then they install it. So to manage the dependency, one of the great way AWS provide, you can create your layers, and within that layers, you upload your zip file, which contains all the dependencies, and then your function just use that, linking that dependencies to each other, and that makes your problem completely solved. And you just use your all the sort of dependencies along with your Lambda functions, which depends on either Java, so jar file dependencies, your Python, your all pip installation dependencies, and you can just go and boom, everything will work fine. So guys, please subscribe my channel. There are a lot of things I'm going to cover. Most importantly, I'm definitely fast in discussions and putting the point here. I don't want to waste your time. Just think in a way and try these just practices along with me, and more you will work. I'll overall create a great example of POCs and projects. I have industry experience of more than 20 plus years, and I do have a great examples of demos which are running live in productions. So guys, be in touch and do let me know for your feedbacks. I really appreciate watching this video. Thank you very much for your time and support. Cool man. Thank you. Bye.